After this, David subdued and humbled the Philistines by conquering Gath, their largest city. David also conquered the land of Moab. He made the people lie down on the ground in a row, and he measured them off in groups with a length of rope. He measured off 2 groups to be executed for every 1 group to be spared. The Moabites who were spared became David's servants and brought him tribute money. David also destroyed the forces of Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah. When Hadadezer marched out to strengthen his control along the Euphrates River, David captured 1,700 charioteers and 20,000 foot soldiers. Then he crippled all but 100 of the chariot horses. When Arameans from Damascus arrived to help Hadadezer, David killed 22,000 of them. Then he placed several army garrisons in Damascus, the Aramean capital, and the Arameans became David's subjects and brought him tribute money. So the Lord gave David victory wherever he went. David brought the gold shields of Hadazer's officer to Jerusalem, along with a large amount of bronze from Hadazer's cities of Tabah and Berothai. When King Toi of Hamath heard that David had destroyed the army of Hadazer, he sent his son Joram to congratulate David on his success. Hadadezer and Toi had long been enemies, and there had been many wars between them. Joram presented David with many gifts of silver, gold, and bronze. King David dedicated all these gifts to the Lord, along with the silver and gold he had set apart from the other nations he had subdued: Edom, Moab, Ammon, Philistia, and Almuk, and from Hadazer's son of Rehob, king of Zobah. So David became very famous. After his return to destroy 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt, he placed army garrisons throughout Edom, and all the Edomites became David's subjects. This was another example of how the Lord made David victorious wherever he went. David reigned over all Israel and was fair to everyone. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was commander of the army. Joshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the royal historian. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Elamich, son of Abiathar, were the priest. Seraiah was the court secretary. Benani, son of Jehoiada, was captain of the king's bodyguard. David's sons served as priestly leaders. Feeling super blessed. Today, my special guest is my husband. You can see how happy he is. And he's going to read chapter 9 for me from 2 Samuel.
One day, David began wondering if anyone in Saul's family was still alive. For he had promised Jonathan that he would show kindness to them. He summoned a man named Ziba, who had been one of Saul's servants. "Are you Ziba?" the king asked. "Yes, sir, I am," he replied. The king then asked him, "Is anyone still alive from Saul's family? If so, I want to show God's kindness to them in any way I can." Ziba replied, "Yes, one of Jonathan's sons is still alive, but he is crippled." Oh, poor kid. What was that noise?
My computer.
Oh. "Where is he?" the king asked. "In Lodebar," Ziba told him, "at the house of Machir, son of Amiel." So David sent for him and brought him from Machir's home. His name was... Are you kidding me? Mephibosheth. Mesophilioma. He was Jonathan's son and Saul's grandson. When he came to David, he bowed low in great fear and said, I am your servant, Mesophilioma. But David said, don't be afraid. I've asked you to come so that I can be kind to you. That's a nice one. Because of my vow to your father, Jonathan, father of Mesophilioma. I will give you all the land that once belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you may live here with me at the palace. That's pretty cool. Okay. Mephibosheth. Oh my gosh, how do you say that? Mephibosheth, also known as Mesophilioma, fell to the ground before the king, saying, should the king show such kindness to a dead dog like me? Oh, he exclaimed. Then the king summoned Saul's servant Ziba and said, I have given your master's grandsons everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and servants are to form the land for him to produce food for his family. But Mephibosheth will live here at the palace with me. That's a tough name. Ziba, who had 15 sons and 20 servants, dang, that's a lot of kids, replied, yes, my lord, I will do all that you have commanded. And from that time on, Mephibosheth ate regularly with David, as though he were one of his own sons. He had a young son named Micah. So why couldn't they name him something like that? Seriously? His son Micah. And from then on, all the members of Ziba's household were Mephibosheth's servants. Oh, wow. And Mephibosheth, who was crippled in both feet. He had a horrible name and he was crippled. Poor dude. Moved to Jerusalem to live at the palace. The end.
He got dropped when he was a baby.
On his head?
So we're going to show you the name that was hard to say. Oh, I'm going to drop it. I'm going to drop the whole thing.
Don't drop it.
Sorry, it's right there, guys. Can you see it?
Yeah, can you say it? No.
Can you see it and can you say it?
No.
It won't even come in clear. Thank you for being my guest.
Oh my gosh, I knew.
Today is such a blessed day. Not only did I have my husband read, my daughter's reading 2 Samuel 10.
Sometime after this, King Nahash of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanan became king. David said, I'm going to show complete loyalty to Hanan, because his father Nahash was always completely loyal to me. So David sent ambassadors to express sympathy to Hanan about his father's death. But when David's ambassadors arrived in the land of Ammon, Hanan's advisors said to their master, do you really think these men are coming here to honor your father? No, David has sent them to spy out the city so they can come in and conquer it. So Hanan seized David's ambassadors and shaved off half of each man's beard, cut off... How do I get lost with a paper reader? Cut off their robes at the buttocks and sent them back to David in shame. When David heard what happened, he sent messengers to tell the men to stay at Jericho until their beards grew out, for they were very embarrassed by their appearance. Now the people of Ammon realized how seriously they had angered David. So they hired 20,000 American mercenaries from the lands of Beth Rahab and Zobah. 1,000 of the king Maacah, 1,000 from the king Maacah, and 12,000 from the land of Tob. When David heard about this, he sent Joab and the other entire Israelite army to fight them. The Ammonite troops drew up their battle lines at the entrance of the city gates, while Arameans from Zobah and Rehob and the men from Tob and Maacah positioned themselves to fight in the open fields. When Joab saw that he would have to fight in two fronts, he chose the best troops in his army. He placed them under his personal command and led them to fight the Arameans in the fields. He left the rest of the army under command of his brother, Abishai, who was to attack the Ammonites. If Arameans are too strong for me, then come over and help me, Joab told his brother. And if the Ammonites are too strong for you, I will come and help you. Be courageous. Let's fight bravely to save the people of the cities of our God. May the Lord's will be done. When Joab and his troops attacked, the Arameans began to run away. And when the Ammonites saw the Arameans running, they ran from Abishai and retreated into the city. After the battle was over, Joab returned to Jerusalem. I just realized I had to keep reading. The Arameans now realized that they were no match for Israel, so they regrouped. They were joined by additional Aramean troops summoned by... I don't even want to say his name. I don't know how to.
Is it that long name?
Hadadadir. Hadadzer.
Hadadezer?
No. From the other side the Euphrates River, the troops arrived in Helam under the command of Shobash. The commander of what's his name? Hadadezer forces. When David heard what was happening, he mobilized He mobilized all Israel, crossed the Jordan River, and led the army to Helam. The Arameans positioned themselves there in battle formation, and then attacked David. But again, the Arameans fled from the Israelites. This time, David's forces killed 700 charioteers and 40,000 horse. Including Shobash.
It's okay, go with it.
The commander of their army. When
Hadadezer?
Yeah. When Hadadezer and his allies realized they had been defeated by Israel, they surrendered to them and became their subjects. After that, the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites.
I'm so glad you didn't give up. So excited. It's so fun to be able to include your family, and whether we read it and say it right, I know I'm not doing this with commentary, but to involve your family in reading God's word is just incredible. So I hope you'll read the verse yourself, get the names yourself, but thanks for sharing. Thank you. The following spring, the time of year when kings go to war, David sent Joab and the Israelite army to destroy the Ammonites. In the process, they laid siege to the city of Rahab, but David stayed behind in Jerusalem. Late one afternoon, David got out of bed after taking a nap and went for a stroll on the roof of the palace. As he looked over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. He sent someone to find out who she was, and he was told She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and wife of Uriah the Hittite. Then David sent for her, and when she came to the palace, he slept with her. She had just completed the purification rites after having her menstrual period. Then she returned home. When Bathsheba discovered that she was pregnant, she sent a message to inform David. So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." When Uriah arrived, David asked him how Joab and the army were getting along and how the war was progressing. Then he told Uriah, "Go home and relax." David even sent a gift to Uriah after he had left the palace. But Uriah wouldn't go home. He stayed the night at the palace entrance with some of the king's other servants. When David heard what Uriah had done, he summoned him and asked, "What's the matter with you? Why didn't you go home last night after being away for so long?" Uriah replied, "The ark and the armies of Israel and Judah are living in tents, and Joab and his officers are camping in the open fields. How could I go home to wine and dine and sleep with my wife? I swear that I will never be guilty of acting like that." "Well, stay here tonight," David told him, "and tomorrow you may return to the army." So Uriah stayed in Jerusalem that day and the next. Then David invited him to dinner and got him drunk. But even then, he couldn't get Uriah to go home to his wife again. He slept at the palace entrance. So the next morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and gave it to Uriah to deliver. The letter instructed Joab, "Station Uriah on the front lines where the battle is fiercest. Then pull back so that he will be killed." So Joab assigned Uriah to a spot close to the city wall where he knew the enemy's strongest men were fighting. And Uriah was killed along with several other Israelite soldiers. Then Joab sent a battle report to David. He told his messenger, "Report all the news of the battle to the king." But he might get angry and ask, "Why did the troops go so close to the city? Didn't they know they would be shooting from the walls? Wasn't Gideon's son Amalek killed at Thebez by a woman who threw a millstone down on him? Then tell him Uriah the Hittite was killed too." So the messenger went to Jerusalem and gave a complete report to David. "The enemy came out against us," he said, "and as we chased them back to the city gates, the archers on the wall shot arrows at us. Some of our men were killed, including Uriah the Hittite." "Well, tell Joab not to be discouraged," David said. "The sword kills one as well as another. Fight harder next time and conquer the city." When Bathsheba heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. When the period of mourning was over, David sent for her and brought her to the palace, and she became one of his wives. Then she gave birth to a son, but the Lord was very displeased with what David had done. So the Lord sent Nathan the prophet to tell David this story. There were two men in a certain town. One was rich and one was poor. The rich man owned many sheep and cattle. The poor man owned nothing but a little lamb he had worked hard to buy. He raised that little lamb, and it grew up with his children. It ate from the man's own plate and drank from his cup. He cuddled it in his arms like a baby daughter. One day a guest arrived at the home of the rich man, but instead of killing a lamb from his own flock for food, he took the poor man's lamb and killed it and served it to his guest. David was furious. "As surely as the Lord lives," he vowed, "any man who would do such a thing deserves to die. He must repay 4 lambs to the poor man for that one he stole and for having no pity." Then Nathan said to David, "You are that man. The Lord, the God of Israel, says, I anointed you king of Israel and saved you from the power of Saul. I gave you his house and his wives and the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And if that had not been enough, I would have given you much, much more. Why then have you despised the word of the Lord and done this horrible deed? For you have murdered Uriah and stolen his wife. From this time on, the sword will be a constant threat to your family, because you have despised me by taking Uriah's wife to be your own. Because of what you have done, I, the Lord, will cause your own household to rebel against you. I will give your wives to another man, and he will go to bed with them in public view. You did it secretly, but I will do this to you openly in the sight of all Israel. Then David confessed to Nathan. I have sinned against the Lord, Nathan replied. Yes, but the Lord has forgiven you, and you won't die for this sin. But you have given the enemies of the Lord great opportunity to despise and blaspheme him, so your child will die. After Nathan returned to his home, the Lord made Bathsheba's baby deadly ill. David begged God to spare the child. He went without food and lay all night on the bare ground. The leaders of the nation pled with him to get up and eat with them, but he refused. Then on the 7th day, the baby died. David's advisors were afraid to tell him. He was so broken up about the baby being sick, they said. What will he do to himself when we tell him the child is dead? But when David saw them whispering, he realized what had happened. Is the baby dead? He asked. Yes, they replied. Then David got up from the ground, washed himself, put on lotions, and changed his clothes. Then he went to the tabernacle and worshiped the Lord. After that, he returned to the palace and ate. His advisors were amazed. We don't understand you, they told him. While the baby was still living, you wept and refused to eat. But now that the baby is dead, you have stopped your mourning and are eating again. David replied, I fasted and wept while the child was alive, for I said, perhaps the Lord will be gracious to me and let the child live. But why should I fast when he is dead? Can I bring him back? I will go to him one day, but he cannot return to me. Then David comforted Bathsheba, his wife, and slept with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved the child and sent word through Nathan the prophet that his name should be Jedediah, beloved of the Lord, because the Lord loved him. That's the end of 12. I hope you'll join me tomorrow for 2 Samuel 13 through 18. I hope you have a blessed evening. In Jesus' name, amen. Peace.